Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Xavier Harding, and I'm on the content team here at Mozilla Foundation. Welcome to today's panel. We're talking about building healthy online communities. Regardless if we realize it or not, content creators and even social networks play a large role in forming online communities that are healthy. But beyond the who is the how. How do we more consistently form communities online that are healthy for the people that are a part of them? That's what we're here to discuss today. Joining me are four amazing, fantastic panelists. The first, Ari Malenciano. Ari is a creative strategist at Google's Creative Lab, professor at NYU, founder of Afrotectopia. Ari's cool. Ayman Hariri. Ayman is the CEO of VERO, the social network without ads or algorithms. Joanne Molinaro, lawyer, author. Joanne is known on social media by millions as the Korean vegan. If you haven't seen her TikToks, you should. And last but not least, we have Max Joseph. Max is an award-winning filmmaker. He's directed short films, produced films, written for films and TV. If you've seen Catfish, you've seen his work. I'm excited to chat today. One last thing is that we're taking questions for this panel in real time. So tweet them at Mozilla Festival with the hashtag Creators Challenge. If you're watching on the MozFest Plaza or on Vimeo, you can use the chat function to add your questions. Okay, that's a lot of talking for me. Panelists, how are we feeling? Welcome to the panel. Wow, pretty high energy levels in this panel.
Feeling great, Xavier.
Perfect, nice. Okay, I want to start out by level setting. So what do we tend to see as the root cause of the problem when it comes to negative behavior on social media? Maybe we can start with Ayman, since VERO is a social network.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with how you design the online space and the tone that you set. So I don't believe that people just automatically behave badly. They certainly, we see a lot of times people behave really well in the real world, in the non-online world, in the offline world, but then find that they can behave badly online. But it has to do with sort of what's encouraged. What is the tone of the space, the design of the space, whether it's creating an online forum where everybody can be anonymous, for example. Anonymity tends to then have no repercussions on the person. And so you're sort of setting things up to potentially go in the wrong way. When people feel that they're in a real space, even if it's online, then they tend to behave most likely how they behave in the real world. And that's sort of the approach we've taken in things, is that we're blurring the lines between the offline world and the online world, as opposed to in a positive way towards the offline world, because we feel like people want to have a safe space online that matches more the real world, where they can feel like if somebody's going to behave badly, the platform will take action and say, listen, that's not cool. And if they do it, repeatedly, or if they don't understand, then they don't get to be there.
Yeah, Joanne, I saw you nodding your head during that. One question I want to ask is, do content creators play a role in kind of fostering healthy communities? And if so, what is that role?
Yes, I do think that content creators play a large role in fostering positive or safe communities. And they can also, unfortunately, play a very large role in doing the exact opposite. I think that, what's really interesting, because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think what Ayman said was very appropriate, is that there are really two main contributors to negativity and toxicity on the internet. One is individual and one is systemic, and so there are things that we as content creators as well as consumers can do on an individual basis. And there are things that need to be done on a systemic basis in order to address this problem. I think on the individual side, we as human beings, and I've talked about this before, have evolved to be 13 times more likely to engage or respond to negative feeling content, something that makes you feel unsafe, something that makes you feel angry or anxious, than we are to respond or engage with things that make you feel good, things that make you feel positive. And that's totally understandable. Human beings have evolved that way because we're risk averse. That's why we survived, when the saber-toothed tiger was there, that's kind of how that worked, right? So that's understandable. But unfortunately, from a systemic standpoint, what that means is that there are companies out there that are incentivized by ad revenue based incentives, which means they want more engagement, they want more clicks, they want more views, and they know that people respond more when they are angry, when they are feeling outraged, sometimes legitimately so. So we have this systemic world where the wrong incentives are in place, and we as human beings are now, there's no curb to our behavior. Nobody's telling us you can't act that way. Nobody's saying, well, that was very rude. We're anonymous because of the internet. So we get to act out our most basic instincts. And that's what creates this sort of negative space. So as content creators, our job is to try and create a different kind of incentive and say, hey, let's double down on the things that make us feel good, that make us feel inspired, that make us feel encouraged, instead of just saying, you know what, it's going to pay more money, so I'm just going to make everybody mad and really unhappy.
That's true. That's actually my goal with this panel at the outset, make everyone mad and unhappy with this panel. No, I'm just kidding. Max, how do we combat the kind of ways social media is if everyone's kind of operating with their saber-tooth tiger brain? Like, how do we even start to combat this?
Well, there's Joanne's answer and Eamon's answer totally on the money. I actually just recently made a documentary kind of about online. We have no rights on the internet. Like, we have rights in the real world. People can't stand outside your window and scream at you all day long. You can call the police and they can be removed. But on the internet, not only can one person scream at you all day long, thousands of people can scream at you all day long, and you have virtually no recourse. Have you ever noticed that if you have a problem on Facebook or Twitter, there is no phone number to call? These are the wealthiest companies in the history of the universe, and they don't have customer service. There is no get me out of this situation phone number, which is pretty insane when you think about it. So there's a real human rights, civil rights issue on the internet. And the major obstacle to getting those civil down. And the way that now no one's going to be charged with any crimes, but the Australian government has basically a hotline. They have a phone number, whereas we don't get a phone number. They essentially have a phone number that they can call and get something taken down, which is pretty amazing. Now they need the rest of the world to kind of join them in this so that there's more of a network going on. They're just, one country doing this. So that's like the that's the legislative kind of policy issue. The human, and then of course there are the social media companies themselves, right? If they need to decide that they don't want to make money off of all this negativity, and they have to decide that they want to protect their users at the cost of potentially losing sponsors and losing ad revenue, right? Because their business models are built around engagement. And engagement without, with no restraints on it leads to kind of a lowest common denominator angry thing, which leads me to the third thing. So there's government, social media companies, and then there's us, right? Population on the internet, and certain people are making billions of dollars and have tons of power and are posting amazing Instagram pictures from their wonderful vacations. And then you've got other people who are being oppressed and who don't feel like they have money or freedom. These people are going to really enjoy seeing these people get taken down, even if these people getting taken down don't deserve it. And so you've got, and that's a societal problem, but it's also, we have a responsibility to not click on the really shiny, sensational, clickbaity stuff, because the more we do, the more it will get fed to us.
Got it. Yeah. When you say that, you make such a good point about the fact that like social networks today don't have a hotline you can call, like a phone number, like customer service, basically. I want to get Ari in on this conversation. And what I want to ask you is, when we look at the biggest name in town, when we look at Facebook and the things that they own, like Instagram, what are some things you think, or you would say that they can improve on when it comes to building healthier communities?
Well, I think I don't have a Facebook account. I haven't been on Facebook for years. So I think that might work to my disadvantage as far as thinking about what they could improve. But I think generally when thinking about communities, as someone that has built communities, it's thinking about, I think a lot of these problems stem from when there's just a general dissonance amongst the community itself. What do we define as this community? Why are we coming together as a community? And I think the first step in building a community is defining what are our values and our shared goals. And I think when you have a group of people that are surrounding something that's shared amongst them, then it's easier for conversations to be healthy, for people to understand how to treat each other. And you have these standards and boundaries of how we're going to treat each other. When you have that set in place, then it's easier to decide, okay, this isn't healthy in our community, and we should make a decision of how to remove something that's not healthy within our community. So I think there needs to be these levels of boundaries and rules and kind of placemaking for people when they enter communities. And I think as we exist in this world where we have such large communities, like different social media platforms, where it's not so much of you're creating a community around people that have a shared idea, it's more of you're creating a space for people to then create their own communities. It's a lot of management within that. You have these substandards of what are ways that people want to interact with each other within these different spaces. So it's not a one size fits all anymore. It's more of we need a lot of different rules for a lot of different groups of people. And for me, what I've been thinking more about is, I think that sort of thing is just always going to happen in humanity. When you have a large group of people and you're trying to satisfy a large group of people with one set of rules, it's nearly impossible. So it's thinking about how can I create something that's very catered to a specific group of people and what works best for them, which doesn't work well in social media. So I think it's we have to reimagine what does social media mean to us in a way that makes sense with the way that humanity operates.
That's such a good point, because you actually, A, just answered the next question I was going to ask, but then B, that's a good point, because when you can't please everybody, You can't tell everybody yes. You can't do everything for everybody. You know, Joanne, you're someone who has millions of followers on TikTok. How do you please everybody? How do you go about pleasing everybody? Has there ever been a time where you did something and then a portion of your fan base is like, no, we don't like this? Like, how do you please everybody?
Well, I don't please everyone. I was a trial lawyer for 17 years, and my goal was to win, 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 win. And every now and again, I wouldn't. And I would have to tell myself, you can't win them all, Joanne. I mean, it literally was like I'd win on summary judgment, and that afternoon I'd get some really bad news from a client being like, you suck. And so I'd have to tell myself, I can't win them all. And if you think that that's what you're supposed to do, then you might as well just get out of this profession, because you'll be very, very disappointed with yourself all the time. And it's the same thing with basically anything you try to do. And certainly the case when you're building a community, when you're on social media, whether you're off social media and building a community. You could be doing that in your own neighborhood and still face the same sort of disappointment. However, when I think about my community, I think about two things a lot. What can I do to bring value to my community? And what can I do to challenge my community? That is a very important component to what I'm trying to do. I'm not just sitting there giving them what they want. I'm also thinking very much about what they need and how do I make them grow internally. So I know, because of that second part of what I'm trying to do, that there will be pushback. There will be people saying, you know what, I don't want to grow. I'm pretty happy with where I am. I like I like my view of the world. It's myopic, it's narrow-minded, it's silly, but I like it. So I know that I'm going to face that. And so I go into every single video knowing that there's going to be some people who are not going to like this. And that's okay, because even if they don't like it, chances are they'll still stick around because of the strength of that community.
Oh, wow, that's such a good point. The idea of like bringing value and challenging your community, because it's so very easy for us to just live in these echo chambers where we're just kind of all digesting the same content, nodding our heads to the same. So it's like that quote that it makes me think of that quote. If everyone's thinking like someone isn't thinking.
Yeah.
I think your kind of mindset's a good response to that. Maybe we can bring it back around to Eamon, because I think about when it comes to bringing value to the internet, so VERO is a product, is not the most popular social network. Facebook is the most popular social network. I have to imagine it's a challenge to get folks to use it, because people will just use the social networks that their friends are on. What kind of challenges have you seen when it comes to like establishing VERO or making it a thing? Because the product you have, the value is clear, no ads, no algorithms. But I have to imagine there's a challenge there of making it a thing. Maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. You said the biggest social network is Facebook. Actually, the biggest social network is the one that lives in the real world. It's the one that brings us together. And Facebook is, or online social networks have kind of hijacked this thing called social networks. And I don't think at all that there is really a social network online that matches the construct that exists in the real world, and certainly hasn't unlocked its true power and its true nature. Its true power and its true nature doesn't turn everything negative. It got us out of the caves, and here we are on a Zoom call, getting to meet each other. Some of us for the first time, and some of us are old friends. And I think that's where what we're trying to do is we're trying to be that alternative that gives you that feeling of being with friends, even if you've met people for the first time. And we do that by getting out of the way. We don't put there's a reason why we talk about no data mining and no ads. It isn't because of the business model itself, but it's also because of the red line that we feel we'd be crossing. And it's a slippery slope. You end up knowing more about your users than they know about themselves. In order, as Joanne mentioned earlier, to serve your real customer, which is the companies that want to put ads in front of people. People are not your your customers when you're serving them ads. They're your target. And what we're trying to do is make people feel that they're the customer, they're the center for us, they're our main concern. And so the challenge is, how do we, I mean, we're practically in some cases feeling like we're the organic alternative, like in food, that is going up against sugar. And so but we know how that ended up. People are choosing their health. People are choosing the better path. The hard part is to align incentives in such a way where people feel that they're moving their friend networks over, moving their followers over to a network that is healthier for you because it's getting out of the way. Frankly, it's not adding any gotcha ingredients into the mix, is better on the long term. The biggest challenge that we've had, and I'm in a fortunate position to be able to fund the company long enough to be patient, is you have to be patient. You have to play the long game. And so allowing for something to be there for when people do make that decision, it'll be tough to start with. It'll be, maybe you have to go to the edge of town to go get that organic version of whatever it is that you need, but eventually it'll be the norm. And any thought of going back to the old ways becomes utterly ridiculous to even think about, because we know where that leads us.
You make a good point. I mean, it's a good comparison. I think about, with organic, the example, like you said, it may be on the fringes of town. Organic is something you would buy if you can afford it. Not everybody is able to afford that extra cost of organic, and we have to rely on sugar. And I think about the kind of incentive models that Joanne was talking about before. Our world is kind of set up. Sometimes it feels like our world is set up so that the bad thing for us is just the easiest thing to acquire, whether it be, using certain virtual assistants or browsers versus using the healthier choice that's maybe, a little slower or like harder that not everybody uses. This question can be for everybody. How bullish do we feel about being able to actually change the incentive models? Because unfortunately in our world, people only kind of want to do stuff when there's money involved or it's going to make them a lot of money. And it feels like the good thing is not the thing that's going to make people a lot of money. Are the incentive models changing? Is that actually a thing that can happen? I know we had AIM before. Maybe we can start with like Max or Ari or Joanne even.
I do think that the incentive models can change, but they kind of have to change with the users. The users I think the users are waking up. I mean, we've certainly woken up to data mining. We weren't aware of it. I made Catfish for 7.5 years. And I always say that like, we're going to look back in 100 years if we haven't melted, and be like, hey, remember when you could just be anyone on the internet and it didn't matter and there was no consequences and there was no ID verification? Wasn't that wild? It was like the Wild West. I mean, like, I think Catfish is kind of a time capsule for what happens when there is no accountability on the internet. And I think we've woken up to that to a certain degree. We've certainly woken up to data mining. It's like organic foods. Like, we took a while, but we did start saying, hey, organic is better. It doesn't get us sick. But I also think that living with a multiplicity of options is going to become the norm. It certainly has become the norm with TV, right? There used to be like 6 channels, and now there are, your Apple TV has got all these things on it, and you go to different places for different things. Like I'm on VERO and I love VERO. VERO is a very artistic community that really they talk about art. People like, I will post things on VERO that I wouldn't post on Facebook or Twitter. And if anyone likes music, it's like you like, I don't know, I'm just talking about me, but like, I like the underground bands But then once they become really popular, like it's like Yogi Berra said, like nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. Like that's kind of how I feel about Facebook or Twitter. It's like they've already blown up. It's nice to kind of go to the smaller ones, and each one is for something different. I'll post something different on Twitter than I would post on Instagram, than I would post on Facebook, that I would post on VERO. And it's just kind of figuring out, what you want to get back and where that belongs.
Yeah. All right. Can we change incentive models? And if we can't, can we create healthy communities even in the face of those incentive models?
That was towards me.
Yeah.
I was going to build on what Max said I think a lot of that is just alluding to the fact that there's a cultural moment that exists within certain spaces. And so when you have access to those different cultures, that creates an incentive for you to be able to contribute more to it or join that community. So I think one big incentive generally is a culture. Another one is what we've experienced with a lot of big social media platforms, and the data mining is convenience. So there's a level of convenience, even with what Eamon said of, we don't want to have to go to the fringes. We want to be able to have things right there, especially in such a fast-paced society that we live in now, where we can get food delivered to us in 20 minutes. I think that level of convenience, once we exchange that value of convenience for, I want to create a world that is better for the people that I love and want them to live in, or my children to live in, I think it's a changing and reorientation of values that I think is really important.
For sure. One thing I want to remind folks who are watching, you can tweet at us your questions at Mozilla Festival with the hashtag Creators Challenge. We can take questions live, so feel free to drop questions there or on the chat in Vimeo or at MosFest Plaza. One thing we should also talk about is harassment online and negative behavior online. Maybe this can be a place where folks can talk about things they've seen online or experienced in the past, and maybe ideas that they have of ways we can be better in the future. Maybe Ari and Joanne, you may want to start if you have any thoughts.
Sure, I'm happy to kind of weigh in on trolling and harassment. I certainly get my very fair share, probably unfair share of it on an hourly basis, and it's a very difficult question, because on the one hand, I'm a big proponent of free speech, and I know what that means, not in the uninformed way. I mean, in the informed way. Like, I know what that means, but I also take the spirit of that in my social media as well. I don't like curbing speech, even if it's nasty and negative, because I've always believed that you need to create a space where people feel safe enough to reveal even some of the uglier things, because otherwise I won't know that the ugly things are out there. I won't know what I need to fight against. I won't know what I'm pushing up against when I'm challenging my community. So, there is some thought that maybe there should be some regulation of speech to ensure that only the good things are published and only the good things are out there. And then you start to ask, well, what are the good things and what are the bad things? Sometimes I need to hear things that I don't want to hear too about my content. And just because somebody says something that's critical doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. So there are all of these sort of gray areas about harassment and things like that. There's certainly not gray areas as well. If somebody DMs me something totally disgusting and like unsafe, and I think that perhaps we need to be better about, enforcing what I think are existing policies, probably across the board for a lot of these social media. But how do you scale that kind of enforcement? I mean, look at TikTok. It's grown so enormously in such a short period of time. They're doing everything they can to get their arms around what they know to be a problem. But it's very, very difficult to enforce these types of existing policies. So, I mean, in answer to that, honestly, unfortunately, I think it falls to individuals right now. It falls to the consumers to try and restrain yourself from being totally irrational and nuts when you're communicating with a content creator or other people in the community. But unfortunately, I think the labor does fall pretty heavily on the content creators themselves. They have to learn to focus on the objectives of their community building, those who bring value to their community. What do they need, and not on these fringes of negativity that sometimes break through.
Yeah, when you say it falls on individuals, I think it would be really convenient to have that hotline that Max talked about right about now. Eamon, you run a social network. How do you go about kind of filtering between the constructive criticism that Joanne talks about and the really nasty, disgusting stuff that also Joanne talks about? Like, how do you filter? How do you discern through that?
Okay, so yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and just for a second, I'll start from the bottom up, because I think that the problem starts at the beginning of designing, building, thinking about building a social network or an online space of any kind. But let me just start from the bottom up. I mean, from our standpoint, if we ever see, you kind of know it when you see it. I mean, I know I'm describing that's sort of the testing of something else, other kinds of content, but you know it when you see somebody's intent is to be hurtful and harmful towards somebody else. And we have to remember, I mean, some people are seasoned, they know how to deal with negative comments just in the world and online, and they know how to look past it and not let it affect them. But for other people, it turns into the worst kinds of results. Some people hurt themselves, take their own lives. I mean, the results can be catastrophic if not dealt with right away. Our policy is just to basically not accept it in any way, shape, or form. Like when we see that kind of behavior, it's just not for us. This isn't the space for you. We deal with it like if we were to see that kind of behavior in a restaurant, if we were restaurant owners or owned a space that people were coming to and hanging out in, if we saw that kind of behavior, we would ask these people, this person to leave. But I come back to, what I was alluding to at the beginning of my answer, which is, what is your goal? We kind of forget where a lot of what the incentive structure has been put in place for online communities to grow very, very fast. Grow fast, don't care how, doesn't matter what the cost is, doesn't matter what the effects are on society, doesn't matter what anybody's doing or saying or how they're behaving and what it means or how it affects everybody else. Just grow as fast as you possibly can. Then it incents people to come on board those platforms and want to be a part of it. I mean, I know people who, you hear these terms like, I'm dabbling in TikTok, or I'm testing it out and seeing well, why? What's the incentive there? Well, there's so many people on there. I need to be on there. Why are you on there? What are you getting out of it? What are the, at least on YouTube, you hear, that people are making money off of the ad revenues of clicks and, things like that, which is a kind of TV model. It's not there's, a certain amount of data that they know on people that they're showing ads to. But at the end of the day, you're watching content that people are making and are thinking about and producing, and the level of quality has gone up significantly. But when you're incented by your investors, by the system, by an exit strategy that has you looking at engagement at any cost, nobody's asking, nobody in a boardroom, nobody in an investment pitch talks about engagement and splits it into positive engagement and negative engagement. They just call it engagement. The first question out of any investor's mouth is, how many users are using the app? How long are they staying in the app? When we use tools to be able to just check that the app is working, you have settings like measure addiction. It's like these are terms that have just found themselves into the industry. And so to me, it's no it can't be any surprise that we find ourselves in these anonymized, just get the friction out of registration, as little friction as you can get. Just have them click on one thing and then they're in. And there's no repercussion on them whatsoever. They can, if you ban them, they can create another account. It doesn't matter. What do we expect to have happen and come out of that? So for us, we deal with it on the onset. On the onset, we've always asked, for example, for people's phone numbers. Now, people have no problem giving phone numbers on WhatsApp, but as soon as they come into a social network that says, give your phone number, it immediately creates a filter. We're a subscription service. We've never turned subscription on up to now. We intend to at a certain point. But the reason why we hold that dear is because it's the only way that you align your incentives and yourself with the users that are on the platform. They are the customer. They're your number one priority. And so these sort of frictions that otherwise, people in the industry, they look at us and they think we're mad because we're putting in almost automatic filters to reduce the number of users. It seems like we want to reduce the number of users that come into the app. We're doing it to take care of the people that are in already. It's like something that I mentioned to the team a lot when we're thinking about marketing, when we're thinking about anything that we're doing, is I say, think of yourself as hosts in your home. When you've invited a bunch of people to your house, do you take care of the people that are inside, or are you out on the street trying to get people in? Decide who you want to be. We're the company where we're taking care of the people that are in. And anybody who would like to join and behave by the rules are welcome. Anyone who's not is not. There are other spaces, obviously, where they can do that kind of behavior. Having that kind of attitude, I think, has gotten us to where we are today, where, as Max mentioned, we have artists on the platform. We have people like Zack Snyder, Abby Osea, Khalees, these phenomenal artists that are on the platform that are sensitive human beings, but they feel safe. And that's our formula.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think about going back to food. You're basically, what I'm gleaning from this is quality versus quantity. Right now, the bigger quantity, the more you get paid. I imagine a restaurant that brags about having the most food. No one goes to restaurants because you have the most food. You want to have the best food.
Right.
When we talk about quality versus, or just quality in general, I think, Ari, something when we spoke last week, something you said stood out to me. We were talking about the idea of like creating a set of agreements so everyone kind of knows how to operate within a space. Can you talk about that? Can you talk more about just like building online communities that are quality and not just worried about quantity?
Yeah, I think that even speaks to what Eamon has just said. Of when you're creating a community, you want a standard of, we have a set of shared agreements. We agree to abide by these agreements when we're operating in this space. And it can be something that's written out, like a list of agreements, or it can be a series of steps that you have to take in order to enter this community, just as Eamon has with, the different steps they have to take to enter that community. So I think as communities build their spaces, it's thinking of what is the experience of someone entering this space, and what does it mean for me to create certain barriers that are not meant to keep people out for a sense of exclusivity, but it's more of for keeping people out for a sense of safety for those that are already inside. And I think, just as mentioned earlier, we are so used to kind of driving fast and creating really big and popular things without thinking about what does it mean once this exists, and how do people feel once that exists and they're inside of it. And I think when you have these shared ideas, it's easier for people to understand, okay, when I'm entering this space, this is how to operate, and this is how to communicate with other people, and these are our values. So I think at the core of any community, and just the way that we've existed in the real world, there's always a sense of identity and shared identity. When you're entering different spaces, you know that people will have that same value system. And I think we just have to carry that over into online spaces and not be reactive, but be proactive when we do that.
I love what you said about being proactive. Like my next question has to do with being proactive. So Eamon, you already have founded a social network, so maybe you can't answer. You can answer this question, but I don't really want to hear from you on this one because you already made your social network. The other three panelists, you're making a social network. what are the things you want to proactively add to it to kind of prioritize healthy communities and prioritize quality and not quantity? What do we want to see from social networks going forward? Max, do you want to start off?
I do, but I'm going to tie it to what Ari and Eamon were saying. I think it's a lot to put the pressure on the users. I don't think it's fair. Ari mentioned driving fast. So like, let's talk about cars for a second, because cars and the internet are not like, as far as metaphors and analogies go, it's pretty good. Like it took 100 years for cars to be on the roads for people to come along like Ralph Nader and say, hey, these cars need safety features. They need seatbelts. And when seatbelts were introduced in the idea of seatbelts in the late 1970s, people were firmly against them. People were like, you're not going to tell me that I need to wear a seatbelt. This is my freedom to not wear a seatbelt. But by the late 80s, it became totally normal. Now we don't even think about it, right? Same thing with traffic lights, right? There used to be no traffic lights. There were all these accidents at intersections. There was no speed limit. People could go as fast as they wanted. But eventually enough people got hurt that other people were like, hey, we need regulation. This is a giant industry. This is federal, interstate infrastructure. And we need things that are going to keep our people safe. And I don't think that social media companies are going to do anything. I mean, thank God there are people like Eamon who have integrity and want to, start something that keeps consumers at kind of the center of what they're doing. But without government regulation, it's just not going to happen, or just some kind of regulation. And so whether it's in the boardroom, when a company is getting investors in, the investors need to say, hey, where are the safety features, right? Like, look at Zoom. Zoom came along, they didn't think about the safety stuff. And then as soon as the pandemic started, like people started Zoom bombing and stuff, and they had to kind of retroactively come up with safety features, which is the same thing that's happening with Twitter and Facebook and all these things. It's all retroactive, as Eamon said. They grow and grow and grow, and there's safety is just not built in. So I think we as users have to demand from the government that the government has to hold these companies up to a certain level of safety standards. The investors need to know that they need to be asking those questions of founders. What are the safety features? Because when there are no safety features, the marginalized communities, women, people of color, LGBTQ, they get disproportionately impacted by freedom, by the kind of no freedom on the internet, or no constraints on the internet. And so I really don't, yes, great founders can come along and we can move from a ad-based model to a subscription-based model and all those things. But until the government or some body creates a standard like seatbelts or whatever it is for cars, like it's going to be a free-for-all, and it is going to be a race to the bottom. And there's just we need laws.
You're so right. I mean, I'm imagining all the industries now where if quantity over quality was prioritized, it would just be a bloodbath. It would be like cars. It's just crazy. I want to pause this question for a little bit because we got a question on Vimeo that I think is actually a really good question. This question is from Aubrey Johnson. Thank you for your question. Many younger people right now idolize YouTubers and content creators as future professions. What advice do you have for small creators who feel incentivized to adopt negativity-based growth strategies that work, but often cause damage in the process? Anyone can take this one, but yeah, anyone can take this one.
Well, I think that first of all, it's kind of cool that becoming a content creator is even an aspirational profession. Like, that just certainly wasn't one of the college majors that I had at my disposal when I was in high school. So I think that's really neat. But I think that, first of all, it's easy to do the thing that gets you the most views and the most clicks, right? But the fallacy in that is the notion that, well, if it got me this many clicks and likes this time, then that means I'll get this many clicks and likes next time and next time and next time and enough next times to sustain a career. That is just not true. Most of the time, you're going to get one video with lots and lots of views and tons of comments, and that's it. It's certainly not enough to get you enough money to sustain a career. You need to have a purpose in your videos. You need to have a purpose in your brand, whatever it is. Your content creation needs to have a thematic purpose that is easily recognizable, so that when somebody watches your video, oh, that's a so-and-so video, I can recognize that. And if it's all based upon ranting and being angry and riling people up, I got to tell you, I'm a consumer. I was a consumer of TikTok long before I was a creator of TikTok. And there were a lot of accounts that I was like, wow, that makes me so mad. That's so racist. How dare they do this? And, I'd get all riled up and I'd be like all fired up for it. And then I'd follow them and I'd really enjoy their content for like the first 5 minutes. And then after literally every single video that they do is just like spewing rage and, wrath and things like that, it gets fatiguing at a certain point. And I'm starting to wonder, like, what is the point of your account? Like, just to be mad, like all the time, like really, really angry all the time. And now I'm like, are you like literally looking for things to get mad at? Is that what the point of the account is? So I do think that there is room for accounts and creators that are not based on negativity and not based on getting people angry. And I'm not delegitimizing some of the anger, because some of it is very legitimate and needs to be there, right? But my content is largely not anger based. It's all like, feel safe, feel good. I want you to feel what you feel and have a safe space to, communicate what you feel. Let's enjoy our triumphs through that struggle, right? And it works. I mean, so there is a space for it. So I think that would be the message to younger people who are perhaps considering a career as a content creator, is that, wow, why not feel empowered to do something a little bit different from what maybe other people are doing, and in that way find success? The great thing is always do good and do well while doing good. That is an absolutely sustainable model.
That's awesome. Yeah, you make such a good point. Anybody else want to chime in on that before I start? I just feel like, unfortunately, incentive models incentivize the bad stuff from going viral. Like the bad stuff will just, like, what's that phrase? A lie will travel all the way across the world before the truth has time to put its shoes on. Feels like that's in the halls of every Facebook hallway, probably. Like, so I wish we would see more content in the vein of that, like do good and do well while doing good. Maybe we can, if there's no other questions from audience. Oh, go ahead, Max.
I mean, like, I want Joanne to be so right about that. I really do, because that's what I believe too. But like, trolls, we have created a troll machine. I mean, this is the troll industrial complex, and the less shame you have, the better you can do a lot of the time. I mean, like, and it depends on who you are, but I mean, look at certain politicians who have been presidents of the United States recently. Look at, there are a lot of people who are weaponizing social media and drama, right? Like playing into the drama, saying provocative things. It's like talk radio. Like that's how a lot of these people came up on talk radio. And I think there's always going to be people who play that card. And, I think you have to ask yourself, what do you want coming back to you? Like those people who play that card, like they can thrive in that dark, angry world with that anger coming back at them. And I think you as an individual creating stuff have to ask yourself, do you want that to be your day? Do you want that to be the water that you're swimming in? You know, and some people naturally swim in that water, and like they might have a lot of likes and money coming in, but they might be miserable in a lot of other ways, or they might be making people around them miserable. And I think that's like but yeah, I don't think there is a way to turn that off. And I think there always are going to be provocative, drama, controversial, shameless. We've created a survival of the shameless system right now. And it's really unfortunate. And the, you know, cable news, assholes, talk radio, people, like, yes, and they are growing. And I don't think that they get punished right now. And that's just maybe life. I think you just have to say, do you want to be one of those people, or do you want to do something that kind of brings positivity back to you, right? So it's kind of depends on the kind of person you want to be.
And if I may, just really quickly, because I really do understand that sort of kind of despair, almost it's like hopelessness a little bit, right? And I think that, you know, I'm always a little bit more on the side of less government than more government, just because I always worry a little bit about too much government. But in this situation, it's like, okay, we're operating under this sort of, you know, cloak of anonymity that the internet provides for us, right? So there is literally no consequences to our behavior. Whereas if, you know, there's this great TikTok that I saw where this woman was like, you know, every time I get a hate comment about my running, it's like somebody's literally coming up to me while I'm running and being like, you're slower than my grandmother or something like that. You know, would you do that in real life? Of course not. You wouldn't do that in real life because you're not crazy. But we do it like in the internet because there's something that says, oh, well, you could totally get away with it. And so, you know, whether it's the government that somehow, whether financially or otherwise, subsidizes social media platforms that are deciding to do a subscription-based business model that doesn't capitalize on data mines and the most, you know, basic and prurient interests of human beings, or whether it's regulating those that do decide to do that and say, fine, if you want to play by that game, then you need to follow these so-called, you know, these rules and these parameters to ensure the safety of consumers. Or, you know, to the point of politicians or other sensationalists and, you know, pundits being very rigorous about fact checking, you know, before the content even gets out there. Like these useless, like, oh, this content may have information related to COVID, so pay extra attention. I mean, that's completely useless. I mean, what we need are, you know, before that sort of content gets out there, some standard, at least some basic standard of fact checking that happens to ensure misinformation doesn't sort of get out there and cause the sort of division that unfortunately, again, human beings seem to thrive off of. I mean, these are things that I think maybe do need to happen at a systemic level, as opposed to, like Max said, you know, putting the burden on the creator and the consumer. I mean, they're operating in the wild, wild west right now. And that's basically what's happening. And until something comes over and creates a level playing field, it's very dangerous. And we've seen it like spiral out of control in such a short period of time. Cars took 100 years. The internet has been around for like what, 13,000 days or something like that. And it's already created so much havoc.
All right, here we are at day 13,000 on the internet. Joanne, I'm glad you brought it back around to my kind of final question before that, that audience question. And I want to now bring it to Ari. You know, right now we have a lot of cars and no seatbelts, not literally, but metaphorically. Could we see a world where these cars that we've created, these troll machine cars, have seatbelts? Is that viable? What would it take to get there? What's the final takeaway you want to leave us with?
I mean, there's so many things. I think just what Joanne said, which really struck me was, or not really struck me, but just was a great reminder of that balance of too much government versus too little government, and kind of like that ability for agency, which I think is a lot to think about, of how do we create these kind of rules and standards where good may mean something very different to someone else. So I don't know exactly how to answer that question, but I would say for me, a really important value is to not strive for bigness so quickly. It's big is not always better. I think what all of us are emphasizing is the quality versus the quantity, and creating spaces that are catered to a certain kind of community or person. So I don't know about the big legislation for seatbelts in the internet world, but I think thinking about how to create something that's really special and careful and intentional for a group of people and letting that slowly build, I think that could be a solution.
Yeah, and final word we have 5 minutes left. Eamon, you've got a car on the road right now. You added a seatbelt, no one asked you to. Will we ever see a world where seatbelts are mandatory? And by seatbelts, I mean healthy social networks are the norm.
Yeah, again, I keep coming back to the real social network. The stuff we're doing is online. It's code. It's representation. I think that, again, the more we can get out of the way and let people just deal with things in a normal volume. So when you have a platform or you have a behavior of the platform actually invisibly working to grow negative sentiment, putting things in front of people that they didn't ask for, that will get a reaction out of them, you're always going to play catch up. You're always going to be on the defensive. And society, people, individuals, communities cannot win against something that is sitting and it has no other function but to get a reaction out of you. It doesn't care. It's not going to let up because it likes you or doesn't like you or thinks you're cool or doesn't think you're cool or you're right or what's being said. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the measure of success is the success of the organization's ability to get engagement. My answer to that is get out of the way, get it all out. Don't do any of that. And so rumor will move as fast as people are willing to push it, not with the help of something that is up 24 hours, working towards getting its goal at any cost without knowing the price. We talked earlier about organic being more costly and whether people would be willing to pay. The way that I look at it is you have to look at the total cost, and that's what people end up looking at. They may be having cheaper meals, but they're paying bigger medical bills. And over their lifetime, that just doesn't work, not for them, not for the people that they love, the communities that they're in. So I'm not saying that subscription is the answer to all evils or any of that. I do believe, though, that when you need to know as much as you possibly can about your target to get them to do something, I don't think that that's right. And the more we do that, the more we're going to end up in the same problem over and over again, encouraging bad behavior. And I don't think that that's our norm. I think we want to connect with each other. And I think that we can figure things out together as long as nothing gets in the way of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, we should end the panel there. I hope to one day, meet you all in the real social network of life. This is a great panel. I hope to have you all back someday soon. Thanks for watching our panels. Everyone out there in the audience, keep an eye on our social media at Mozilla Festival on Twitter. That's where we plan on announcing future conversations, future panels, other great things happening at MozFest this week. I'm Xavier Harding. You can find me at I am Xavier on Twitter. Special thanks to Zaina Abiasi, Lucy Click, Jesse Ward, Marisa Gomez-Adams, Mark Walsh, Andy Kochenhofer, the VERO team, our amazing panelists, and our amazing audience who is watching right now. Take care, everybody. See you next time.